if you're looking for an opening which is not commonly seen but is super aggressive and can also be played positionally, this is what we call the King's Indian defense. For kings, guys, and it starts off with knight to f6. Now, this guy with absolute bravery played knight to f3. He's going to transpose. But the King's Indian is basically a setup, guys. It is the setup that destroys all attacks. Now, pawn to g6, followed by bishop to g7. As you can see by this perfect arrow, it is slicing the board in half, guys. This opening, all you need to remember is feint shot of the bishop and simply get your king to safety. By that, the first step of the King's Indian defense is completed. If you are unable to do this, then you have probably learned chess the wrong way, because I can assure you, every single person on this planet can play these four moves. So get this done, and the next step is to put the pawn on d6. So in the King's Indian defense, remember, this is a dark square technique opening. We just control dark squares, guys, and our opponents die. So we don't put our pawns on light squares. Like, we are not here for the light squares. We want the dark squares. So we go pawn to d6. This is again the King's Indian defense. And to show you how much we want the dark squares, we're not even afraid to give up our light square bishop. Like, anything that is not prepared to fight for the dark squares, we're getting it off the board, guys. Now, in general, though, bishops are worth more than knights. Alright? Now, in this specific scenario, this knight is helping to control like some dark squares in the center. We are getting rid of that completely. Now, he castled. You could play this certain ways. Now, for me, I like structures with pawn to e5. You guys, you don't have to play c5 here. They're like different lines. But in general, the two main breaks in this scenario to again control the dark squares are moves like pawn to c5 or pawn to e5. Like, one of those pawns are going to go into the center depending on your preference. And boom, center is control, guys. Now, for this game, I played knight to c6. And this is simply finishing my development. Now, I'm going to even pull it back for you guys and then pull it forward. All I'm doing for the King's Indian defense. Look, get my knight to f6. Step 2, put bishop on g7. Keep it on the diagonal, cut the board in half. Step 3, simply castle the king and put the pawn on d6. If any piece that is not controlling the dark square, you can simply get it off the board. That is that is the main reasons why we're actually giving up our light square bishop here. Knight c6, he provoked us, we take the knight. Done. Bishop takes. Now, what can we use to help control the dark squares? We already have a knight pointing on the d4 square. Boom, pawn to e5, and we're now putting more pressure on that pawn. So remember, in the middle game, this knight, you can even put it on d7, up to you, your choice, and play the pawn to c5. It doesn't matter. Once you're controlling the dark squares, I'll actually take it. So pawn to e5 here, and we're already asking white to let us infiltrate into his half of the board. Now, this is where the attacks begins, guys. This is where the pressure is unfold. So here, if he goes pawn to d5, then knight to d4, and my knight has entered the premises, guys. Now, this is where things get dangerous for your opponents. Now, in the game, he played knight to e2, and I'm going to show you guys exactly what happens when like a knight gets into your opponent's half of the board, and how can this actually be dangerous. Now, e5, he delayed a bit. He played now knight to e2, and I made this preparatory move, rook to e8. Now, in the middle game, remember that we're simply improving our pieces. Any piece that is not doing work, we're trying to give it work, guys. We're putting rooks on potential files that can be open. In other words, if white isn't careful and it allows me to open up this e file with pawn takes e5. I could put this on the board for you. Let's say that is like super careless. Let's make it super careless. Like bishop to e3, just developing a piece naturally. Then pawn takes e5, and as you're seeing, we're having two attackers on that e4 pawn. So by me simply capturing, that pawn would have already been cooked. So we're seeing exactly right now. As a matter of fact, let me slow this down one last time. We are seeing exactly by us putting pressure on the center that white is finding it absolutely difficult to find good moves. Now here, this is what we're talking about. Like I also mentioned in one of my past videos that the difference between space and overextending is, remember, space is when you're restricting pieces. If you're not restricting anything, then your pawns are just there as targets. Now, in normal games, you would see that your pieces are like clustered and you can't get them out. You're getting crushed with space. Now, for the King's Indian defense, which is why this might fool a lot of beginners, they find it extremely difficult to play against this opening, because what they have seen normally or what they're seeing normally on YouTube, it's not really discussed here, which is in this opening. No, pawn to h3, e5, knight to e2, rook e8, and to stop this move, pawn takes d4, my opponent finally played this move, pawn to d5. Now, for all the guys who watches my channel, do we go forward in chess or do we go backward? Now, for the lower rated viewers, sometimes even intermediate players, they kind of disregard moves when, like, I call it short calculating. Like, they see knight to d4 and they're like, I'm gonna be losing material, and they just stop calculating there. Now, in chess, you always check your forward moves first, meaning the more pieces you have that is able to go forward, the higher advantage is going to be into chess. Let me just X this off. So knight to d4 was indeed played. And why is this a good move? Now, remember what I told you guys, that in this opening, this bishop is going to be a monster if white isn't careful. Now, I won't go too much in detail with that, but just understand that in most games, that bishop is going to be a monster. And if not, we just, again, attack on the dark squares. So, knight to d4, and this is also showing the idea of my move rook to e8. Now, in the game, my opponent captured, and he is not able to take a second time. And why is this so? Now, remember, you guys are supposed to be able to see this from here. Always practice to look for forward moves in chess before retreating. So knight to e7 is a good move. It's also, I wouldn't say good, it's okay. It won't get you butchered like in the next two moves. Now, knight to d4 is fighting for activity. We're trying to control squares in our opponent's half. Alright? We're creating problems. Methods. We're just trying to actually make our opponents go wrong. So after taking, if he takes the pawn one last time, do you see a move in which black could use right here to win material? And this tactic is called the discovered attack. Now this bishop is on the same line as the enemy queen, and we have a piece in front of it. Now with this tactic, the discovered attack, we simply move the knight, and we're again hitting the queen with a super active position. As you can see, our knight is putting pressure in our opponent's half. Bishop cutting the board. He is underdeveloped. My rook is active. Everything is like crystal smooth, guys. Alright? Now, instead, my opponent played takes and rook to e1. So, he's basically protecting the pawn on e4. He did indeed open up the e file for me. And if he's not careful, not because he didn't take my pawn on d4, that doesn't mean that I will not take his pawn on e4. So he currently has one defender of that pawn. I have two attackers. He just simply added a second defender. So what is the problem with white's position right now? And this is where, again, the lower rated persons would kind of find it difficult. Now, in the middle game, in chess in general, you want all your pieces to be active. Now, in this opening in particular, this bishop normally finds it super difficult to get itself a decent square on the chessboard. Now, if you're having bad pieces in chess, it's basically you temporarily playing down a piece. Like, there's no way for this to get active. All I did was simply bring my knight back to d7. I said in my past videos, whenever you're playing this opening, if you manage to actually get this file open, just ensure, not this file, this diagonal open, just ensure that you're removing the pieces that are in front of it. Now, this could actually aim at two squares. The knight could go to e5 or c5. Now, the fact that the game is actually a lot more open, you are seeing where the dark squares are actually coming to life right now. But remember, this is what we're playing for whenever we go for this. Now, we now have pawn to b3. White is indeed trying to finish his development and connect his heavy pieces. Bishop to b2 is going to add two attackers to my d4 pawn. In this scenario, I simply connected my rooks, brought my queen to f6, and remember again, guys, all I'm doing is trying to put pressure on my opponent's half. The reason why as black we're not feeling attacked, it's because all these pieces are sitting ducks. It's not really doing anything. If you have no pieces doing anything, then you're not giving your opponents a chance to go wrong in chess. Remember, put pressure, you might get something out of it. So queen to f6, I'm not adding pressure to that bishop. Went bishop to b2, and now we have pawn to c5. Now, this is also going to be a little bit of an advanced topic, which is when to know when your pawn structure is better. So here I have a pass pawn. Now this pawn, by me playing pawn to c5, if black manages to get this like fully solid, which, I am the one with the black pieces, so this will be possible. It's going to be restricting, again, white's activity. So he already has one bishop dead, like it's cooked. And then imagine that we're going to have this bishop again, just looking at a pawn on d4. Like, it's just passive pieces, guys. Passive pieces can't win games. If you're passive, it means that you're just simply cocooning yourself. You're like defending the whole game. Not how you want to play chess, guys. Instead, he empoisoned on c6. I know that you guys have like a specialty for this. And I simply recaptured. So it's still giving this bishop a chance to somewhat look at the pawn. Also, he has the bishop here. Now, whenever you have the bishop here in chess, you want to keep the game as open as possible. What do I mean by this? If he manages to actually get like this bishop active on this file, unfortunately he can't, but if he manages to get this bishop open, then this bishop is going to start to dominate some pieces like my knight. You could have, again, examples in like other videos where this is shown, but currently his bishop is bad, the knights are going to be more powerful. Again, in open games, bishops thrive. He now went rook to b1. This is the first move this man has played, which I don't really like. He's planning to protect the bishop though, which is, again, something that you guys can actually take down for tactics. Tactics tend to work whenever your opponent has like loose pieces. So if you have like two or more unprotected pieces on the board, that is a possibility of where you could get like a four, just like a tactic in general. So high rated guys practice most times to actually just keep their pieces protected. Now he went rook to b1 and I went rook to b8. This is simply me improving a piece, putting a rook on an open file. So remember, in chess, get the pieces active. If you don't hear anything else from my videos, I have said this multiple times because that is the golden rule of chess. Activity. If you're not doing anything else in chess, guys, you don't need any book for this. You don't need any courses, any books. Just play active. Rook to b8, pawn to g3, and pawn to c5. And this is not the first structural advantage. We're seeing where the dark squares are indeed covered. We have a pawn on d4, and I want you guys to get comfortable with having activity in chess. So we are now boxing out our opponent's pieces with pawns. When g3, this bishop is so sad that its best duty is to sit back on g2 and allow the pawns to come forward. Now after c5, he went bishop to g2. And remember that I also want to get my pieces forward in the game. Like my knight on d7 could want to go to e5. The drawback of this move is the fact that he can actually play pawn to f4 and kick my knight from this active square. Now, this is the reason why I played this move, pawn to h5. I was about to quiz you guys on this, but this might be a difficult one to spot. Now, if he plays f4 immediately, then I'm going to have h4 for myself. And what I'm doing is basically removing the guard off the f4 pawn. It would look like this. If he takes, then q takes f4. And I also want you guys to get comfortable again with the fact that even though it's equal material, if your pawn structure is looking like garbage, like it's all about the place, material is not going to matter. In most scenarios, I know that you're going to be like one or two off cases, but in most scenarios, your pawn structure, like if it's super weak and your opponent's pieces are super active, they'll just get picked off the board. So this is the reason why pawn to h5 was played, to discourage this move pawn to f4. So remember, if he played f4, all I would have done is simply played h4, undermining the pawn on g3, and then he would have been left with weaknesses. I could put this one more time for you guys. A lot of weaknesses on the board. So he went rook to f1 instead to actually play the same thing, pawn to f4, and stop this knight from getting active to the e5 square. Remember, think of chess as active versus passive pieces. If my pieces get active and your pieces stay passive, you're going to lose. If you're losing games and you're like, how did I lose that and I did nothing wrong? Check the game, guys. You were playing passive. So rook to f1. Two ways in which you could lose games. You could like either like really blunder, or your position gets like super passive. The blunder part, anybody below 1,000 or even 1,500, you guys know what I'm talking about. Like blunders happen like every 5 moves or 10. I'm joking. So pawn to h4, and he was here again threatening to push his pawn to f4. So I undermined the pawn on g3 and pushed my pawn to h4. Now what is this doing? If he plays f4, it comes with a consequence. I'm going to be taking on g3, and I'm going to be winning a pawn. Whether I could hold on to this pawn is going to be a separate story, but black currently has the advantage, and we still have a target on h3. So h4, again, just trying to discourage pawn to f4. He didn't do it. That was the good news. And he played pawn to g5 instead. And this is a huge mistake. And what is this doing? We already have control over the g3 square somewhat. And I am looking at the board right now and I'm like, all right, in the middle game, I need to start improving my pieces. I know that this bishop normally is good on this diagonal, but this is where our chess understanding kicks in. We know a bad piece when we see one, guys. Like, if it's not getting any scope, any activity, we need to get them to better squares in chess. And this is how we came up with the move, bishop to h6. Now, also take note that there is a time, is that you have to like actually understand timing in chess as well. If we waste a move, even though we know what to do exactly, we know that we need our pawn breaks in chess. Like we need our rook to get more active, we need our knight to get into the game. What you're going to realize when it comes on to middle game planning is the fact that you also need to master timing. Now with the bishop coming to h6, it has been timed properly. Any other move will allow white to get this move pawn to f4, and guess what? This is no space. Remember, it is not restricting pieces from getting to good squares. Let me just show you guys what I'm talking about. Let's say that black does not understand what's happening and plays like a normal move such as pawn to a5. As you can see, it's a huge mistake and the bar is slowly dipping into white's. Alright, it's just like reducing the advantage of black. And now this move f4. The same move that worked before does not work again. It is restricting pieces. This, what white has, is now gaining space. If I play bishop h6, a move that could have been played before, because of the space of his pawns, he can start to have tactics in his favor. My bishop and my queen is under attack. Whenever two pieces are attacked at the same time, it's going to be difficult to protect both. So, that's the reason why bishop to h6 in this scenario, stopping f4. Because if he plays f4, remember we have two defenders of that square. He only has one. We would just simply take and plant a pawn on g5, and that bishop would have been stable, like 100% super solid. We also could get out of this pin by putting our bishop on e3. A lot of things, guys. We could also put our queen on e5. It's just a healthy pawn, nothing to worry about in chess. So after bishop to h6, preventing f4, my opponent played this move, bishop back to c1. So he is looking at the fact that his bishop is doing nothing on this diagonal, and he wants to trade it off for my bishop on h6. Now, if I take on c1, this is going to be your first test. What piece would you guys capture back with as white? I could even flip the board for you. And this is going to show me how you guys understand in terms of like controlling and dominating squares. This is for advanced viewers. Again, like beginners might find this a little bit difficult. But after bishop takes c1, understanding the fact that black wants to start to lock down all these dark squares and kill you, suffocate you slowly, what piece would you capture back with after bishop takes c1? Now, if your answer was with the rook, again, you are wrong. In chess, look, like if I get pieces in those squares, guys, you're not getting my pieces out. All right, just look at this. If my queen starts getting into f4, like your pieces are getting shut down. You could imagine like my knight, I could just make like random garbage moves. Like bishop is dead, rook is dead. You don't want to be hemmed in whenever you're playing chess. All I'm seeing is I have a pass pawn. I'm having the pawn breaks, which I could play in the future to activate my pieces. Active play wins chess. Alright? Now for you guys who are starting out, just practice this and then you'll work on conversion later. But understand that this is the way, guys. Now, what he should have, I didn't take it though, but he would have played q takes c1 and tried to get some dark squares this way. This would have actually included moves like pawn to f4 in the future and trying to gain some, again, space. So here, what was played instead, I didn't take because of q takes c1 and the fact that it would actually get f4 in the future, so forth, so forth. And I played this move, bishop to f4. Simply squeezing the bishop into white's half of the board. And remember, whenever you're trading in chess, you want to trade on your own terms. Guys, if you're trading and you're improving your opponent's position, don't do it. Each move, ask yourself, is this benefiting my position or is it worsening my position? Like, if it's benefiting your opponent's position, just don't do it. It has to be benefiting you. So here, bishop f4. If he takes, he's going to be swinging my queen into the battlefield. Then pieces are going to start flying, guys. So what he wants instead is to get his queen out. Now, what I use for this tactic is basically the drawback principle. So here, what was the queen defending before? It was defending the bishop. Now it is a different scenario. He doesn't have q takes c1, so no, I took. Rook takes c1, and we're going to be seeing the power of what we call a good piece versus a bad piece. Now, whenever you have good pieces in chess, this is again what we call an advantage. Most persons, when they're at the lower levels, they're going to be winning games because of blunders. If your opponents are not blundering, then you just have to outplay them, and you outplay them by getting better pieces in chess. Now in this scenario, I know what you guys are saying. How is the bar so much in black's favor? This is already plus 4. 3.4 to be exact. And everybody who is low rated is going to be like, but it's equal material. I count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 pawns for black. White has 7 pawns, equal pieces. How is this losing? This is where we're going to be understanding the fact that, yes, this bishop to me is not even participating in this game. It is a full-on spectator. This is the clear example of what we call a bad piece, a bad bishop. And you see this a lot in King's Indian defense structures. Whenever you give up your bishop for a knight on f3, you just swap everything and you play for this piece. If you're going for the positional route, if it's attacking chess, guys, trust me, that's another story. We're going to be launching and killing people effortlessly. So, like on the chessboard, obviously, guys, just don't do anything weird. So, bishop to f3, and I know brought my knight to e5, bishop to g2, and g5. The dark squares have been successfully controlled. Now, this is what we call a complete dark square domination. This light square piece has no business participating in this game. And remember, we are going to be taking these people out of their misery. Bishop to g2 and g5 here. Now this guy, this is also the benefit that you guys have when you're controlling squares in your opponent's half of the board. It makes it very difficult for them to make forward moves. Now, I played g5 to stop him from playing pawn to f4. So he played pawn to f4, and now we played knight to d3. So this is simply a double attack. The pawn on f4 and the rook on c1. And see, he is unable to put anything on a dark square, guys. Like, if you look at white's position currently, the only two pieces, or maybe his king as well, but we will take that out of its misery another time. But he has two pieces on the same color square. This is where forks come in handy by knights. Knight to d3, and we're going to be picking apart one of this. Now, this pawn is so painful to lose. This man decided to sacrifice in exchange. With pawn takes g5, knight takes, rook takes, and remember, by me putting my rook on an open or semi-open file, we get moves up the board, guys. We're getting our forward moves up the board. Look at the difference. If my rook was on f8, this move would not be possible. This is the power of activity. Rook to e5. You know what? Rook back to f1. I mean, he has a rook. Like, this bishop is just sitting, guys. He has to use what he has. Like, a rook. Rook takes g5. Rook f6. He has now infiltrated in my area of the board. He's attacking the d6 pawn. I simply defended. And now my opponent made a mistake that I don't expect anybody in chess to practice. So please don't do this. And I call this pawn hunting. And whenever you're hunting pawns, don't do it like this. If you have 5 points of material, this is known as a rook. Right? Clean, clear rook. This is known as a pawn. If you're going to trap 5 points of material for one single pawn, it's like you went into a cave that you have never seen in your life before. What do you expect is going to happen, guys? You're going to die. So here, rook on h4 took a pawn, and there is no escape for this piece. Now, I think I know what happened, guys. Like, the bishop felt misplaced, like it was out of the game for the entire play, right? Like, it's just not doing anything. And then he had one active piece left, and then it just went and it killed itself also. This is what I'm telling you, that passive play does not benefit your chess whatsoever. So don't practice this. Active play. Now, a big area where I see persons struggle in chess is that they don't understand how to activate their pieces. Like, they're like, Raheem, I am putting them on good squares, but like I'm not seeing a way how to give them work. Now ask yourself, what pieces do you have? Like, this is the reason why we learn the fundamentals first. We know that rooks need open lines, bishops need open diagonals, kings need safety unless it's the end game. We bring the king into the game like a boss in the end game. But understand what your pieces want. Knights want outposts. No, I have rooks. No, the reason why I can't find the plan for my pieces currently is because, again, I have rooks. And rooks need what? Open files. So two things come to mind. I need to look for a semi-open file or an open file. And I start to look to get my pieces there. So, are you seeing the line of movement for my pieces, guys? That by me looking to activate pieces, I'm starting to see like ideas in which we could start to infiltrate. If there are no open files on the board, utilize your pawn breaks. If you're finding it difficult to activate your rook, look for your pawn breaks. Now pawn to a5 is going to open a file by force. This move pawn to a4 is going to allow my rook to get into the game. This is what we need when we're playing with, again, if you have rooks, open files. If you have diagonals, open the diagonals for the bishops. Like, in this game, my opponent has like nothing to play for. It's like a lost cause. But in general, guys, just take it down as like a chess tip. Activate the pieces. Now, in the end game, like, guys, this is dead. That is dead. So he uses again the power of the king. So king to f2 and now rook to b8. My rook is now preparing to enter the white's half of the board by, again, shattering this position open. So he now goes king to g3. And this is a no-brainer, guys. Like, a4 here, we just sack the pawn. It's not even a pawn sack because, remember, activity will regain material. Activity will regain material. It's not like I'm sacrificing a pawn and my rooks are over here sitting having a vacation. Just, we're active, guys. So, boom. Takes rook to b4 and we're gaining this back immediately. King to f4. I know a lot of persons that they don't check what their opponent is threatening before they move. So they'll play moves like rook takes a4, lose their rook, and then suddenly this is where they start thinking. Don't be that type of person as well. We are professionals. We always check to see what our opponent is threatening before we move. So we play pawn to f6. We guard the pieces and we practice patience. This guy tried to activate his bishop. We simply captured. We fixed our pawn structure. But I love the effort. He's trying to get his pieces active. Like, you can't kill everything, guys. Now, king to e4. Rook takes c4, king to d5, and rook takes a4. By me sacrificing one pawn for an open file, the rest of my pieces got active. Now in the end game, we know that there's a lot of rules, but to keep it simple, we ensure that our king can get activated when possible. We push or pass pawns in chess. Like even here, we're seeing that our tactics are working. If this is captured, then rook to d4. Again, whenever you attack two pieces at the same time, it's very difficult to defend both. So here he played bishop back to f3. And this is where I'm telling you guys that you will be missing a lot of tactics in your games if you don't think of chess properly. Most persons, they don't look at all their pieces when playing chess. If I'm not like I have a rook. Let's just use the rook and try to make things happen. I am looking at this lonely piece on g5 and I'm wondering all the time, if it's not doing anything, how can I get it in the game? And boom, like the minute the time comes, I am seeing where pawn to e4 is just winning the piece. It's a discovered attack and we got this one done. So we took pawn to a3. Like, this is again still bad for the rooks, like it has nowhere to go except trade itself. So he went pawn to a3, pawn to d2, rook sacrifice. He's just trying to get some pieces off the board. And this is where I'm telling you guys that I am a little shocked that nobody pointed this out. But here, after rook check and queen check, my opponent captured on f6. And you're telling me that nobody saw what is black's best move in this position? I mean, I'm assuming that I was supposed to I don't know how I didn't see this. So even feeder masters have blind spots. But yes, there is a checkmate in one in this scenario. I'm going to even believe that the reason why I didn't play this move is simply because, as I stated in the video, I was looking for a ladder checkmate for the fans. But yes, guys, there is a checkmate in one, which is simply rook to a6. And nobody, none of my fans pointed this out. How is this possible? But here, we simply did the ladder checkmate for the more lower rated viewers, and this was indeed how the game ended. Well, thanks again for watching. Subscribe for more videos like this. Like and share. And remember, utilize what I've said in this video with the principles, the active play, the dark squares for this opening, guys. Do it and improve your chess.